for joining us today to review the Longitudinal Performance Growth Target Interactive Workbook. My name is Colleen Henry, and I'm the Oregon Data Suite Coordinator at Willamette ESD. Joining me today to co-present this webinar is Dr. Cheryl Davis and Sarah Beard, both Senior Analysts for Willamette ESD. We are recording today's webinar and will post the link to the PD Network event listing this afternoon. Sarah, take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. So earlier in March, Dr. Ella Taylor emailed all the districts their interactive LPGT workbooks. I'd like to invite you to open those right now so you can work along in your document alongside us while we're doing this webinar. If you're unable to find the link, just email us and we will send that right out to you. During the presentation of the features of this workbook today, if you have any questions, just jot them down and in an email and send that off to us. We will include our emails at the end of this webinar, so we're really easy to find. Another thing to keep in mind as you are in your workbook, you cannot break this. So if something happens and you think that you've deleted something that you shouldn't have as you've been playing with the numbers, just let us know and we'll get right in there and fix it, because we're sharing this document with you so we can just fix it in real time. So as you're looking at your workbook, at the bottom of your sheet, you've got 5 different tabs, and each tab align with the common metrics and the longitudinal performance growth targets. The source for the data in these tabs are from the ODE's suppressed data report, which they released at the end of February 2023. The layout of each tab is identical. On the left side of the sheet, you'll find the historical data provided by ODE representing the state, the district, which we are calling all students, and then the combined focal group performance for each of these metrics. The combined focal groups, those are going to be your students that are navigating poverty or homelessness, navigating foster care. That's going to be your race and ethnic groups, your students with experience of incarceration or detention. Any of those focal groups are going to be included in there. What you are also going to notice that there are some years where there weren't data, and so there's going to be a gap, but you're not going to see that reflected in the chart. It's going to look like a continuous line.
All right. On the right side of the sheet, you're going to find your longitudinal data chart and interactive performance growth setting table. Below the table, you'll notice a brief set of directions for using the interactive table, and we're going to review those directions together in real time. So we're going to start with the starting points. So those are the cells that are highlighted in blue, and you're going to set 3 starting points. 1 for your baseline target, 1 for your stretch target, and 1 for your gap closing target. We do suggest that districts consider their 2021-2022 historical data as their starting point. So in this case, in this data set, this district was performing higher than the state. So for a baseline, I could choose either the state's target or the district's target. I, in this case, would choose the district's target for my baseline. And you'll notice that the graph here is immediately responsive to what is entered in this box. It does set a flat baseline, and it fills in automatically this purple row. For the stretch target, again, because the state starting point is lower, I'm going to include the all student for the district starting point in this target as well. So right now, those 2 lines overlap each other. And then for the gap closing target, I'm going to select the last data point for the combined focal group, 33.3, and enter it in that final blue cell. All right. The second step is to enter the yearly target gains for the next 5 years in the green box. So we're going to take each one of these targets separately. Your baseline gain is looking at your minimum expected progress each year. So there's a couple things to look at. I can look back and view my data set historically on how my students did. I could look at the average state growth as well. And I can decide how much each year I think for third grade ELA, based on that data, how much is reasonable growth to start with. So I'm going to choose 1% each year. And I'm going to enter 1 in each box. And you'll notice my baseline, which is the solid blue line, has now elevated itself from the stretch line. So the stretch target is next. So this gain is representing the significant improvement that I want to see all students make in this area, but it should also be attainable and realistic. So I can look and see that the top 10% growth that has achieved, so that's 90, that's the 90th percentile of all districts in Oregon. Their top 10% growth looks like 1.3% each year. So I can set that as my target if I want to consider that as my stretch gain. And let's try to go above that for the last 3 years. So my yearly goals do not have to be the same. They can be individual each year. And then for my final gap closing target, I want to get this point up to my baseline. All right, so I want to see at the end of 5 years, hence the name gap closing, how I can bring this up to the baseline of 52%. So I'm going to play around with this. This again needs to represent how I'm going as a district to close the gap between all students and that combined focal group. So this is going to be much higher because the gap is, as you can see, is much wider. So we'll start with 3%. Let's see. And we wanted to get to 52. So, oh, we're so close. Okay. Oh, but I haven't hit it. So I'm going to go back here. Let's make that 3%. All right, because I want to get to 57. There we go. All right, so now that gap has closed. There's no daylight between my baseline and my final target point for my combined focal group. This column here that says total gain, this column is representing how much of the gap is closed between all students and that combined focal group. And like I said, the top 10% growth represents the average yearly growth of Oregon districts that saw the highest increase in their score. So those are districts that are falling in that 90th percentile category. Then the purple row, you don't really have to do anything to it. It automatically computes your longitudinal targets. And this is the row that's going to represent your baseline, stretch, and gap closing longitudinal performance growth targets. And now you're ready to transfer this data into the purple section of your ODE Smart Sheet. All right, Dr. Cheryl, you're next.
Thank you, Colleen. I was just listening to some of the things that you were discussing, and I was thinking you brought out some really good points. But I want to explicitly say that you'll notice that Colleen didn't necessarily put in the same numbers each year, you know, and sometimes that's going to be what happens. You're going to have your initial implementation years, and so there might not be a lot of change, but then you're going to see it take off, or you might even be having some other implementations of other kinds of interventions in other areas like ninth grade on track or third grade reading, that in a few years, you know, you're going to start seeing the fruit of those labors. And so, you know, you can take all those kinds of things into consideration. these kinds of things that I'm bringing up, we put into a data guide to help you have discussions with other people around your data. So the data that we're referring to that you'll be reviewing is in a PDF that was sent to you by ODE, and that can be found in your ODE District Secure site. So here are just a few reminders as you're going through your data. And the data guide does take you through developing exactly the same points that Colleen was talking about: your starting point, your trend or your annual gain, and your targets. So district numbers include all students, including those who are also in focal groups. When the focal groups are listed separately, they may be reflecting some of the same students in multiple focal groups. The point is, don't just run that focal line and all students groups as a parallel line, as Colleen was saying. Your ending gap should be at least smaller, if not meeting your all students target. As more students in the focal groups meet the metric, this is also going to be reflected in your district numbers as well, your all students numbers. Review the individual focal groups separately from your combined focal group. Which groups do you think are going to see the greatest gain from your activities? Recognize your activities might not impact all groups equally. How do you keep track of this, and how will you expand your reach as you continue these efforts? Review your formative data at least quarterly to get a better understanding of the impact specific interventions are having and how long it might take you to see the change that you're looking for. Were your expectations correct? Don't do it alone. This is the perfect chance for you to include teachers and teacher leaders in a data teaming process. Everyone will benefit from having a voice in the target setting process, and you'll get some street level data as well from your staff about how they perceive efforts. So speaking of that, you might have some reluctant leaders or even concerns about cohesiveness in group discussions. Brene Brown has written a great book called Dare to Lead, which has very specific guidance on working through discord and preventing it. And you might find it useful for yourself or for your whole team. You'll find a link to that in the PD Network site, as well as a link to the discussion guide that I've been talking about. And Colleen?
All right, thank you, Dr. Cheryl. So next, we want to talk about how to wrap this process up. So you have set your first target for your third grade ELA common metric. We really recommend that you include a rationale of as far as not only why you set your baseline, but also your stretch target and your gap closing target, because that is information that ODE will want to know as you are co-developing these goals with them. So once you complete that activity, you're going to just do the same process for the next 4 metrics until you complete the entire workbook with both your data set and your corresponding graphs. And then you'll want to share this information and get that community feedback and staff feedback on these goals. So Google makes some really great tools that are native to the Google Sheet, and they allow users to easily share work and content across a couple different platforms. So the first one I'm going to show you is how to share this workbook, maybe with someone else on the team in your district who is going to be co-developing these targets. So this green share button, when you click it, you can enter the direct email to that user, and that way they have editing rights as well. And you can work collaboratively on this workbook. You don't all have to be in the same place. And you can look at that information together. when your district is ready to move forward in this process. In print form, you can print this workbook. So what I want to show you is how to get it all squished on one page. So when you click from the file menu, you click the print option. You have the print dialog box here, and you can choose what you want to print. You can always print the current sheet, that is that tab that is open that you've worked on. I recommend using the workbook option, and that gives you the ability to print out the entire workbook. All of the tabs will be on their own page. So this is a super handy feature if you want to, when you finish this, to print this out and put it in your board packet. Or if you want to provide your community stakeholder group with a printed version, this is an easy way to do that. It may, when you print your or open up this tool in your version, it may not already be set up to fit on one page. And if that's the case, you're going to go down to make sure the page orientation is in landscape. And under scale, you have an option to choose fit to width. That's the second choice here. I'm going to make sure that that is chosen. That way Google knows to squish everything on a single tab into one sheet. Under the header and footer, you also have some more information, like if you want to include the date, the workbook title, or the sheet name. It may squish things up a little bit, and you may need to change some of the margins, and you have the ability to follow the presets that Google has offered there. And then I can move on to next. And this other option on this print window gives me the ability to either use an actual printer to print a paper copy, but I do prefer the save as PDF if I want to create a digital copy and be able to share my goals and targets and rationale in that manner as well. I'm going to click cancel. The other option that I want to demonstrate is how to publish your workbook. So this is a feature that has kind of hidden in Google used to put it under the file menu. Now I can find it by going to the help option and type in publish to web. So there's a couple setup steps here that I'll narrate for you. I'm going to choose to publish the entire workbook, so all 5 tabs, and I want Google to make it into a web page. I'm going to click the green Publish button. Google will ask me if I'm sure I want to publish this selection. I'm going to say OK. And then it's going to give me a unique URL that I can select. Make sure you get all of it in there. I'm going to open it in a brand new tab. And you'll notice when it loads, it looks slightly different than the Google Workbook. None of the editing features are available, but I can toggle between all of the different tabs here at the top. So I can link this link on a district web page to be able to share this information, these targets and goals with my community in that manner. Also, when I go back here, have the ability to look at my publishing settings. I can stop publishing at any time and make sure this last box automatically republish when changes are made. Sometimes as you are publishing information, someone may notice a typo that you'll want to go in and update. And if that is the case, you won't have to republish this workbook. The changes will automatically get sent out to this published URL. If you have someone on your staff in your district who is familiar with HTML coding, you have the ability to create an embedded link as well. And so you have an option to either do a standard URL or an embedded HTML link. But the other thing I like about this URL is that I can translate it. So I have a tab open for Google Translate, and you'll notice Google Translate has the option to translate a website. So I'm going to paste in my URL again, even though it was already there. I want it to detect the language, or I could manually tell it it's in English, and then I can choose a different language to have Google Translate this website into. So I'm going to choose Spanish and click Translate. And now I have my English published workbook now translated into Spanish.
And I think this is what we were talking about before, was that we realize that Google Translate just does have some limitations. So you might have someone who is bilingual on your staff. Make sure that the translation that Google did doesn't have anything wonky in it.
Always a good idea and a good best practice. All right, so now you can, if there are multiple languages within your community, you can translate this information. And like Sarah said, this time I did remember to make sure that you have someone on your staff review it and ensure that that translation is accurate. All right, so we reviewed how to share and how to print, how to present, and how to translate this workbook. So before we wrap things up, we just want to remind folks that if you have any questions about this process, about your goal setting, you can always reach out to us at the center. I'll put our emails up here on the screen. And I remembered what Sarah said, you cannot break the workbook. Aha, I knew that would come back. So if you run into any troubles or issues at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help troubleshoot. We'll be happy to review your data points as well. If you have any questions, we're happy to look at that. And on behalf of the Center for Education, Innovation, Evaluation, and Research from Willamette ESD, we want to thank you for joining us today and, of course, invite you to reach out if you have any further questions. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.